So we're going to talk about the manga, the comic. Do you call it a manga or do you call it a comic? What do you prefer?
How do you call it? A Euro manga.
A Euro manga. Oh,
yeah,
yes, that's right. In
Euro
Italy, you call it Euro manga. That's true.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this interview, and I have three people with me here. This is Giacomo Masi and Ilaria Gelli, the creators of GG Life is a Video Game. And this one is the Italian version, and there will be a Swedish version in August. It will be released. It's 3 books. This is the first one. And we also have the interpreter, Lorenzo Florenzi. So I'm I feel honored to be able to introduce the Swedish readers to your work, Ilaria and Giacomo. So yeah, I would love to start asking both of you, where did it all begin? Like how did you fall in love with comics? If you want to start, Ilaria.
Ok, mi scuso innanzitutto se parlo italiano. Lore, dico a te. Sorry. Amo il disegno da quando sono molto piccola, ma ho conosciuto i fumetti quando ero al liceo e da allora ho amato tantissimo i fumetti manga e non ho mai smesso di leggerli, sostanzialmente.
So she apologizes in advance for not talking in English, unfortunately. But she says she loves drawing since she was a child, but came across comic books when she was about the high school years of life. And since then, she started her journey throughout the comics, especially with mangas.
Yeah.
In my case, it's late love for mangas because my biggest passion, as always, and it is video games, of course. I started reading manga when I was like 13 years old, and I fell in love, especially because the variety of stories and the storytelling that they had, it captured me very, very, very much. And it's because it could vary from a really serious genre like in the seinen mangas and stuff like that, and it can also switch on to the more comical and funny aspect of the media, and I wanted to mix them both if possible, and that's why I fell in love with it.
And you do it a lot in GG also. You switch between the more serious adventures and more funny slapstick.
Exactly.
We'll talk about that, yeah. So Giacomo, you started with film and advertisement, and like how did you start? What attracted you to that field, and how did you go over to making comics?
Basically, when I was like 16, 17 years old, I started as an actor. I did some as an actor in some theaters, and one day, by luck or opportunity, one person told me that they needed a screenwriter, and I always wanted to be a screenwriter and an actor. And from that point onward, I started my career on that, even though from day one, my real goal was to make screenplays for comics and video games, but I had to work and gather experience because those medias are similar, even though they are different. I know it sounds strange, but I needed to gather some experience in that field before I could move on to my real passion. That's the thing.
Did it feel like it was a good development from film and advertisement and then go over to games and comics? Was it a good move, or like did you get could you bring some some experience with you?
Basically, the thing is that especially in advertisement, it's a matter of delivering the message. And being expressful and empathic with your audience is extremely important. And it helped me on TV as well. It helped me to reach and to put they call it the screenwriter glasses. In Italy it's called, like, okay, you need to watch and walk on with the shoes of your character and not just being yourself. And that helped me a lot in order to create different variation of behaviors, and not just different versions of me. That already helped me a lot on that.
That's like a really good experience. Ilaria, you have worked as a teacher for the European Manga Academy, and I know there's a lot of manga schools in Italy, like different like afternoon classes or full day classes. What did you teach, and how was that experience?
Quell'esperienza è stata molto molto formativa per me. Io l'ho iniziata perché non trovavo lavoro come fumettista, in realtà, però è stata veramente molto importante. La scuola per cui ho insegnato in particolare è una scuola molto impegnativa, perché si tratta di lezioni che durano tutta la settimana, dalla mattina alla sera, quindi dalle 8 di mattina alle 7 di sera. E io lì insegnavo un po' di tutto, mi alternavo con un'altra insegnante e insegnavo anatomia, prospettiva, colorazione, c'era veramente ogni tipo di materia in quella scuola, ed è stato veramente molto bello, anche perché sono potuta venire a contatto con tanti ragazzi giovani che amavano fare manga, e ho potuto vedere anche comunque i loro stili, il loro gusto personale. È stato molto molto bello.
So she had a really forming experience with the manga school where she worked. She started there mainly because she couldn't find a work as a comic artist. But within this forming experience, she went into school where they do weekly lessons, and they are very strict schedule from 8 in the morning to 7 in the evening. She basically taught everything. So a full-on teaching with lessons of anatomy, of perspective and coloring. And it was very forming, because she could come in contact with a lot of people, a lot of students, and experience their different art styles. And this was really forming also for herself, other than the students themselves.
Mm-hmm. Giacomo, I have a question to you about the game, because you're working also with an award-winning game studio called Lorenzo Interactive, and you have made a game that has won some prizes called Dry Drowning. Could you please tell us a little bit about the game?
Yeah, basically, Dry Drowning was our first game with the studio, and basically it's a very different story from GG, because it's a noir cyberpunk basically visual novel. It takes inspiration from games like LA Noire or Heavy Rain by making multiple choices. Basically, you can shape your own story with a lot of different branches. And it has a very unique graphical style, and we want to create something in which choices really matter, by also adding basically something connected to racism, the social kind of issues that were forming up when we made the game, and in a dystopian aspect. And sadly, they became true 4 years later. And
Wow.
but yeah, the game got really good feedbacks, because basically it's a really sad story.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really grim story, but it's narrative dependent, but it also has a lot of enigmas, and of course you need to solve cases and stuff like that. We had the opportunity to be selected during Gamescom, and basically during the AGS of San Diego, which are very very big cons in the video game industries as Italian representatives. And we won many prizes connected to storytelling and art style, and we were amazed by the amount of love that we got from people. So, and right now we are working, of course, on other projects, and it was the first step towards a bigger opportunity, and it made me very happy, even though it's a really different story from from the cheerful aspect of GG, of course.
But it's good to have like a balance, to have some cuteness and funny things and some darker things. I know the feeling. So now let's talk about your comic, GG, your Euro manga. So full disclosure, I am also your publisher here in Sweden. So my publishing house, Nosebleed Studio, is gonna publish this in Swedish. We're starting to publish the first chapter in our app, Nosebleed Manga, in June, and in August we're gonna have the first book, and we're so excited because we know this is gonna be really popular in Sweden. We have lots of gamers in Sweden, and lots of young gamers, and this is a really fun story. So I'm gonna do a short summary. So the story is about these girl gamers. It's a team of girls, and they just got the latest patch for their favorite video game, online game that they could play together. But during the patch, they fall asleep, and when they wake up, they notice how the game is seeping into their reality. So the pizzeria is turning into, this is happening in Italy, so the pizzeria is turned into like a fantasy tavern, and the car is turned into a flying griffin, and suddenly they notice that their bodies are also turning into their characters. Also, you learn a lot about how it is to be young and play games. So I think it's a very youthful and very like easy to connect to for young people who play a lot of games. So I really like this story, this first book, and it's gonna be 2 more books. And you already have finished it. So we're gonna talk a little bit about GG. And by the way, GG, the name is it both good game and girl gamer? I guess.
Yeah, basically. Basically.
It's a funny GG is good game, girl gamer. Yeah, it's a good mix of funny of like playing with words. But I guess it was you, Giacomo, who came up with the story, or?
Actually, it's it's a little bit more complex than that, because the original idea from the beginning was to make a web series with real actors, with real girls, to make something basically the stereotypes of gamers. And after a while, we decided, well, perhaps we should make a comic out of this idea with what is it named? Le quattro vignette.
4 panels.
The four panels idea, a very funny aspect of basically they were real normal person that actually play games, but of course they have their own problems and they are really silly in their own way, and so they interact by that. We still have the prototypes of those things, and suddenly one day Ilaria during Lucca actually talked to me and said, I had an idea under the shower, if I remember correctly. and she said to me, what if we actually do an inverse isekai? You know, it's the average guy who goes into the fantasy world. Right now it's the fantasy world who goes into reality, and they are still normal person, silly person that doesn't know how to do anything. So basically that's the funny part. And I said, okay, that's really cool. Let's work on that, and let's make it funny, but also let's put some kind of message on what it means to grow up inside a small circle of friends, but also by adding the slapstick comedy, kind of stuff. That was the basic idea. Yes.
And you mentioned isekai, which is a genre in itself, and I think we need to explain it a little bit. It's a whole genre within manga where, like you say, it's about one character from our world who goes into another kind of world, usually a fantasy world. So the funny thing is that you mixed it, you flipped it over, and that's really very unique. I think I haven't seen it happen in a manga before, so I think it's a unique story. But how did your collaboration with TataiLab was? So you already knew each other from before you started GG, and so you just were like throwing ideas around before you started GG, I guess.
Exactly.
Okay.
Do you want to answer this, Ilaria?
No, prego.
Okay.
Sei bravissimo.
Basically, we knew each other from a very long time. I think it's like more than 15 years now, something like that. 13, 14, something like that. I need to calculate, but it's a very long time. And I knew her since she started basically drawing with the fanzine, her first fanzine, and I was like starting my career as well. And we always wanted to collaborate, and I was extremely happy when we decided to make this collaboration all together, even though comics books were never my first aim, because it's a real passion. But as I said, I'm more into video games. I realized how funny it is to create, and how fulfilling it can be. And Ilaria has been extremely talented, and even though I thought about the characters, I think that the final form of the characters and the reason why people felt in love with them is mostly because of Ilaria. Absolutely.
I don't want to spoil anything, but I mean, especially the development of the character from the human body to the game characters. It's really funny. No, you have to read the manga to understand. But Ilaria, how would you say the collaboration was, and which is your favorite character?
La collaborazione è stata proficua perché, diciamo, Giacomo si occupava molto della prima parte, chiaramente, del lavoro, mentre della seconda. Nel mezzo ci confrontavamo per vedere magari quali punti migliorare e quali modificare, però poi io procedevo molto in solo, anche perché le tavole sono tante. Soprattutto il primo volume l'ho fatto in solitaria, nel senso che non avevo un aiuto colorista dal punto di vista grafico, e quindi c'era molto lavoro da fare, c'era molto da macinare, e quindi è stato abbastanza impegnativo ma molto soddisfacente, perché oltretutto GG è stato il mio primo fumetto stampato, e vedere la propria prima opera stampata è molto soddisfacente, quindi sono molto contenta. Per quanto riguarda... vuoi tradurre, Flo?
Vai, così almeno facciamo una pausina.
Ok, poi dico del personaggio.
Okay, so it was a fantastic experience, both because they worked together. First came Giacomo's part, and then came Ilaria's part. And during these steps, there were some in-between confrontation between the artists to learn more about characters, or just to see if everything was going on correctly. Especially for the first volume of GG, Ilaria had a lot of work to do. Because she didn't have a colorist that supervised her or helped her during the coloring scenes. So especially the first volume was really stressful, but hard and satisfying work. And when it came to the printing part, since it was her first real volume that was being printed, it was really satisfying, and everything in the end paid off.
Dal punto di vista degli esseri umani è Lumia che è la protagonista, perché è un personaggio molto vulnerabile ma anche molto forte, e adoro il suo essere impacciata ma cercare di mettercela sempre tutta nelle situazioni. Mentre il mio vero e reale personaggio preferito è Gwenda, che è che è l'automobile sostanzialmente, che, come diceva prima Natalia, come dicevi tu, si trasforma in un grifone, e la adoro perché lo so, è lei.
So she has two main characters. The first one is human, is Lumia, the protagonist, and she likes her especially because she is very vulnerable, yet a strong character, and she always tries to do her best, even if sometimes she's not capable of doing it. But she tries. And the other character is, of course, Gwenda, the one you mentioned before, that is the automobile that becomes the car that becomes a griffin, and you showed it right before me starting to talk. So
the collaboration was great. I still remember with joy the first time I saw the printed run, because it was my first comic book as well. And while you were flipping the pages, nostalgia hit me so hard because it some time has passed since the first the first volume. and it taught me a lot on how to improve myself as a person, as a professional as well, because of course most of the weight was on Ilaria's shoulder, of course, because she had to do a lot really. And but yeah, it taught me especially how passionate you can become in this kind of area, and the mission that I had and still have on the kind of market. And I think that we wanted to create a mixture of something really unique by also adding, my mission was to create an all girly kind of environment to tell people that you can actually have a good and funny story, even though you don't have the same male boring protagonist and stuff like that. And you can also give them personality, because our target, of course, was young gamers of both sexes, of course. But yeah, the experience was great, and I'm really fond of it, and I can't wait to to see how the Swedish readers will react to it. About my favorite characters, I have two, which are nemesis between each other. Because the first one is Aurora, which is Sir Kill-A-Lot, the blonde thing. SK. Sir Kill-A-Lot comes from the robot from Robot Wars, I think. Ilaria, what was the name of the show? Because Ilaria suggested the name, which is like, let's call it like Sir Kill-A-Lot, which was the biggest the biggest robot. And I say, this is incredible. We need to use it, which is K abbreviated, because she's an extremely mature person, even though she doesn't act like it. And comedy-wise, I think she's the most the most incredible. I cannot say why, but basically, I loved her from first glance, design and behavior-wise. And of course, I always said it, but my real favorite character is Nova, a Korean girl that lives in Rome alongside with the others. She's the most distant and she's a tsundere. Can I say it? she's some sort of tsundere, but actually it's not a stereotype. Actually, she has a reason, and even though basically she has a very, very, very extreme behavior towards the others. She's extremely competitive, a real gamer girl. And what I mean by that, she's extremely competitive and fierce. And the fact that how the story develops, I cannot say it, of course, but during the development of the story, she has always been my favorite character. And of course, especially during the second volume, but I cannot say why.
I have one final question, because we have not enough time. And the last one is, what are you working on right now, if you may tell us something?
Io sto lavorando con Tatai attivamente, sia per comunque promuovere Tatai il più possibile, perché è una realtà a cui tengo molto, e anche su un nuovo progetto che sarà in realtà molto diverso da GG, perché non sarà particolarmente comico, avrà comunque la sua dolcezza, però affronterà anche delle tematiche abbastanza crude, perché si svolge in un mondo fantastico in guerra. E quindi sarà una bella sfida sia dal punto di vista grafico che dal punto di vista della storia, perché mi occuperò anche della parte della storia questa volta.
So, mainly she works in Tatai actively, a lot in the works of promotion, because she loves the reality of TataiLab. And aside from that, she is working now on a new project that is completely different from the slapstick humor of GG, and it's more on a serious note, not comical, but it can be sweet but harsh. And it's very challenging, because this time she has to do everything, not only the drawings, but also doing the storytelling and the storyboards herself. So all by herself.
Wow, that's a challenge. Yes. And Giacomo, what are you doing?
Right now, we have a main project from the authors, so the same guys that made Drowning, that is going to be announced this summer, I guess, something like that, the new project. And at the same time, I'm working as a narrative director on a project called Batora with Stormland Games, which is a development studio here in Italy. And I have the honor to work with Untold, which was the screenwriters for like Horizon, Days Gone, very, very big games.
Wow.
And I'm working with her and the composer of God of War. It's a very, very big project in Italy, at least. And that game is going to be out next year. There are already trailers online, so it's a very, very huge opportunity for me. And alongside with that, yesterday we finished a Kickstarter for Out of the Box, another comic that I have been collaborating with Marta, another author, which is I still work on the I still want to work on the comic book side, even though it's going to it's becoming difficult because time is short basically. And but yeah, I hope that in the future I will be able to keep on working on comic books as well. Absolutely.
So thank you so much, and thank you the audience for joining us, and I really hope you will like also reading the comic when it's out. Thank you so much, Ilaria and Giacomo and Lorenzo. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So I'm gonna do this interview in English, and we have here TataiLab over here. It's Emanuele Tenderini and Linda Cavallini, and this is the founders of TataiLab, which is an Italian publishing house, and we also have their own translator, interpreter, Lorenzo Florenzi.
Hello, it's me.
Yes. So I just wanted to thank you so much. It's an honor to introduce the Swedish market and Swedish readers to the world of TataiLab, so I'm really glad to have you here to join us. And I've been a fan of your work ever since I saw your stuff first time at Lucca Comics in Lucca. I think it was 2016. And this was the first time I visited Italy, and the first time I visited a big festival. This is one of the biggest festivals, I think the biggest festival in Europe. When it comes to comics. And you two, Emanuele and Linda, you are truly a power couple when it comes to making comics, and you both create your own comics, which we will be talking about, but you also have this studio agency / publishing house called TataiLab, which is where you also let a lot of new, aspiring, super talented comic artists produce their own works. So we're going to talk about that. Thank you so much for joining us for this. First of all, please tell us a little bit about the two of you, your background before you started TataiLab. What were you doing?
Vai, inizi te o inizio io?
Ok, vado io?
Vai.
Io prima di conoscere Emanuele, prima di iniziare a lavorare su Lumina e poi a costruire insieme TataiLab, ero un'illustratrice di narrativa per bambini. Ho lavorato per editori soprattutto italiani per 8 anni, penso, più o meno. Questo è principalmente quello che ho fatto.
Vai pure, Flo.
Okay, so Leah was saying before starting TataiLab and before meeting even Emanuele, she was an illustrator for children's books. For almost 8 years she did this work.
Wow.
Mentre io invece lavoravo già nei fumetti, già ormai da 12-13 anni, soprattutto per il mercato francese. Ho fatto molti libri con gli umanoidi associati, case editrici come le Lombard, Delcourt, soprattutto fumetti di ricostruzione storica.
So Emanuele was already working in the comic book industry, and especially in the French market. So with Le Lombard and other French publishing houses, and especially with works of historical reconstructions and brought to the world of comics. So 12 years before
Wow.
now.
Yeah. Was it because I know you, Emanuele, are doing a lot of background art? Did you do artwork or did you do story writing?
Io facevo, no, story writing no,
Disegnatore.
sia disegnatore sia di background e personaggi, ma anche molto lavoro come colorista.
Mhm.
So no story writing, a lot of work of yes, background and coloring, but also focalized also on the characters.
Mm. And this is quite common for Italian artists to work as a colorist or artist for French market, right?
Yeah.
It's
Sì, è normale, soprattutto il mercato francese era molto florido, molto grande, soprattutto nei primi anni 2000. Molti italiani sfruttavano la fiera di Angoulême in gennaio per andare a trovare lavoro proprio nel mercato francese che era immenso, che è immenso ancora.
So this started between the year 2000s,
yeah.
because the French market was really big at the moment, and still it is now, because Italian artists went to Angoulême to show their
Yes.
works because of that. But even now, a lot of Italian artists still go to Angoulême because their comic market is really big compared to ours.
So let's focus on TataiLab. Why did you start TataiLab and when did you do it?
Vai. Perché? Why?
Why?
I don't know. I regret.
Allora, tutto è nato con Lumina.
Sì.
Noi abbiamo iniziato a lavorare insieme su un progetto a fumetti che è appunto Lumina. Quando l'abbiamo realizzato in crowdfunding.
Nel 2015.
Nel 2015. Quando l'abbiamo finito, avevamo bisogno di un editore, no? Di una casa editrice e l'abbiamo fondata proprio per quello. Però mentre abbiamo lavorato a Lumina abbiamo imparato tante cose.
It all started with Lumina. Lumina was done in crowdfunding before even the founding of TataiLab, and working on the volume, they came across a lot of issues that were in the publishing department, to the point that they asked themselves, who will publish this this volume? So in the end, the answer is simple. We could publish it ourselves and use what we have learned in the years of making Lumina, especially in the production part of the volume, to start ourselves a production. So start TataiLab in this case, and with the main goal to help other artists in helping them to know a bit more about what's behind the scenes. So not only on an artist part, but also on a production part. And for example, also Ilaria was one of the main artists that we helped in the beginning. So Gigi is a part of this reality that started before even TataiLab.
Wow.
From Lumina, it went to building the TataiLab as a house, as a publishing house, and then trying to help other artists to come across this world that is not only being an artist and doing stuff for other people, but to create more of an environment where people can learn also about other things other than art.
This is like your work with Lumina is amazing. Not only I think the artwork is so beautiful. I'm gonna show a little bit here for the viewers. The very beautiful artwork. You work with it together, the two of you. But also this book in itself is like an amazing production, because you, for example, printed it on RGB, right? This is not SMIC,
Yeah.
it's RGB.
Allora, sì, ci abbiamo lavorato entrambi. Linda ha fatto i personaggi, io ho fatto gli ambienti e le colorazioni in generale, e sì, è stampato in una tecnica che simula l'RGB, cioè si chiama multicromia, ed è realizzata da una tipografia italiana che si chiama Fonte Grafica, e che permette di aggiungere molti più colori rispetto alla quadricromia. Quindi non abbiamo solo il ciano, il magenta, il giallo e il nero, ma possiamo aggiungere altri colori, Pantone, che vanno a mescolarsi con i colori di stampa sulle pagine, quindi viene fuori un risultato brillante, saturo, che simula le immagini come se le vedessimo a monitor.
So, as you mentioned, the printing of Lumina is very particular because, yes, it simulates an RGB, and this is done by an Italian printing house it's called Fontegrafica,
Wow.
and it helps because all more than the four main colors, so that you said before, like cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Fontegrafica gives you the opportunity to put inside in the printing process a lot of more colors, especially Pantone colors that are more saturated and luminous, and yeah. So this is the example we have in Lumina. In Lumina, we have a lot of colors that normally couldn't be printed in a normal printing process.
Yeah, and I can even see that some of them are metallic. You even use some metallics in here.
C'è una patina di argento.
Wow.
C'è una patina di argento, it's silver. E un'altra particolarità di Lumina è che è stampato in high definition, in HD. Vai Flo, perché
you said it yourself, but I'll repeat. So there's also a color that is silver inside the printing process, and other than that, Lumina is particular because it's printed in a high resolution instead of normal printing processes that don't support high resolution of printing. So the images in the volume are very detailed.
Yeah, yes. And also you like you said, you publish a lot of different artists. Could you show me some other works that you have published?
Yeah. C'è lì. Abbiamo Shuriket di Sara Rossi. È una storia di ninja, gatti ninja e cani samurai. Puoi dirgliela così, Flo.
Okay. So Shuriket is from Sara Rossi and is a book about ninja cats and samurai dogs.
And it has also been published in the Czech Republic, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Dopo abbiamo questo qua, The Last Game, è una trasposizione a fumetti dei giornalisti del più importante sito di recensioni di videogiochi che abbiamo in Italia. È una storia che prende questi giornalisti che sono un po' influencer nel nostro mercato e li traspone in un ambiente post-apocalittico dove devono risolvere una serie di problemi legati ai videogiochi.
So The Last Game is a book that features four main characters, and the main characters are the real people. So they are a group of influencers and journalists of one of the main internet site for gaming news, that is Every Eye, and it features around a story, a post-apocalyptic story, so a fantasy story where the main protagonists are them, but is completely in a different world. So,
poi abbiamo Otedama. Otedama è un bellissimo libro realizzato da una nostra artista italiana che si chiama Francesca Farinelli e che è un viaggio di un monaco che deve ritrovare il suo maestro e coglie l'occasione di questo viaggio per ritrovare anche un po' se stesso. È
una bella riflessione su se stessi.
È un libro veramente bellissimo.
Wow, so pretty.
Sì, è stupendo. Vai Flo, diglielo pure che intanto...
Otedama is from Francesca Farinelli, another great artist that we have. And it's the main story is a journey of this monk that needs to find his master. And while across this journey, he finds the opportunity to find also himself other than the master, and it's very self-centered and very emotional on a psychological type of emotion.
E poi, per dimostrare che anche noi continuiamo a fare i nostri libri, oltre che a pubblicare degli altri, abbiamo Yacht, che è Linda Cavallini Artwork.
Wow.
E anche questo è stato stampato da fonte grafica, lo stesso di Lumina, quindi ha le stesse caratteristiche di Lumina.
So to show that other than Lumina, Emanuele and Linda are keeping up their work inside of TataiLab, other than doing all the bureaucratic stuff of the publisher. This is Yacht, that it's Linda's art book. And it features the same printing process and other printing processes developed by Fontegrafica. And it features all a collection of artworks from Linda during the years.
E poi abbiamo, per ultimo, l'artbook di Ilaria Gelli, Canvas, che ha disegnato prima di disegnare Gigi.
Yes. And this is the artist of Gigi.
The same artist,
yes.
Ilaria, yes. Her first art book.
Yeah, so speaking of art books, the last art book that Emanuele was showing was the Art Book of Hilaria that was printed before even starting GG.
What is happening in Italy when it comes to the pandemic, and how do you survive in the pandemic? I know Italy has been hit hard. How do you survive now? You have no festivals.
No festival, and we survive resting home in lockdown. This is the way. No, è stato un periodo per tutto il mondo, è stato un anno durissimo. Per fortuna nostra, e forse lo saprai anche tu, Natalia, se sei disegnatore non hai tanta vita sociale e stai sempre a casa, vivi sempre a casa. Quindi il nostro stile di vita non è cambiato assolutamente per niente, perché siamo sempre rimasti a casa a disegnare e a colorare. Lo dico scherzando, ma in realtà forse questo è proprio quello che ci ha salvato anche psicologicamente da una situazione così dura, cioè rimanere aggrappati al nostro lavoro, attaccati al tavolo da disegno.
Per le fiere forse anche.
Sì,
vedeva.
tanto di lei questo, okay. Poi parlo delle fiere.
So, the situation in all the world is similar, but mainly as artists, we don't really have a difference between what was before the work and what was after, because as artists ourselves, we stay home to do our work. So this has helped a lot on a psychological level, because there isn't so much difference from what we were doing before and what we're doing now. But being forced also to stay home with the fact that we have work to do, we can still focus mainly on what we're doing and don't be demoralized on what's happening right now. TataiLab was always focused around this sense of family between the artists and the readers. So our community is very, very fond of us, because nobody feels left out. And during the pandemic, we had this problem because selling online, you don't really have the warmth of human interaction, which is very important from an artist standpoint, because artists are also motivated with their work through the relationship with their viewers, because having a viewer coming to the stand, talking with them, making sure that they tell the artist how much they love the work is really a key point in all this this artist community, but also in general, obviously, but especially in TataiLab, because it's the main focus, one of the main focus of the publishing house.
I agree. So let's hope this ends soon. Very quickly.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. thank you so much for this conversation. It was very interesting, and if anyone wants to get in contact with you for deals or reading your books, what's your website?
www.tatailab.com. Send us a lot of money. No, it's a joke.
Yes,
It's
yes.
a joke.
Yeah.
I'm joking.